Okay. Let's start in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Nice. No space. Maybe enough space.
Maybe I'm just gonna shall we wait a minute more? Not sure. Well, I'm just gonna start now because I'm just gonna have some talk about the agenda for May anyway, so people will have time to join. So yeah, I say welcome to Deep Talk With on this sunny Wednesday in Berlin. Super happy that you made it to join the session, and I'm also super excited to talk with Ōsmos about love and relationships again today, but not about belief systems like last time, but about more theory, to be specific, the attachment theory and also the concept of the shadow by Carl Gustav Jung. But before we start, I have some announcements to make because we have an awesome schedule for May with upcoming events, which I would like to present to you beforehand. And yes, here we go. So, So yeah, in May we will have, as in April, every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. CET on Zoom our deep talks as usual, or also like in April. Starting today with the Osmos studio, talking about the attachment theory and also dive into how can we actually identify our personal attachment style and what the attachment style is telling us about our way, how we relationship or how we love. We will have a third session with the girls in 2 weeks' time, where we'll have a little wrap up of everything we learned with them, where we also have a lot of time for discussion and questions from you guys, and where we'll also get some more tools how we can explore our maps of reality even after having these beautiful talks with the girls. And yeah, other topics coming up in May are next week, anxiety and panic attacks. It will be in German, and I will be in a conversation with Katja. She's a psychologist, but also a sufferer from anxiety and panics. And yeah, we will talk about our personal experiences on that topic because I've been also struggling with anxiety and panics. Lately, not so much anymore, but especially last year. So we will talk about how we cope with it, how it feels like to have anxiety, also how we get ourselves out of it. And as she's also a psychologist, we also have like a scientific perspective on that topic. So apart from looking on anxiety or how it feels to be anxious, also look at the topic from a view of what is this emotion actually from a scientific point of view. And then we will have, in the end of May, a talk with Elliot. Elliot is a neuroscientist, and we will have a chat about our brain. We will start with just like some general brain talk on how actually our brain works and how our brain processes emotions, and also talk about how it affects our mental health and the other way around. And as he's also researching a lot in the field of schizophrenia, we will also dive into this topic a bit and also talk about like this common myth of mental illnesses which are around, and talk about our brain and our mental health. And on top of the 4 deep talks in May, we will also have 2 movement sessions, which I'm really excited to announce. Because we will have Sophie Marison on board, who will give us an introduction and a bite of an experience of dance therapy on 2 Mondays, on the 11th, so next week in German, and then on the 25th in English. And yeah, I would like to introduce this format of not only talking about mental health, but also experiencing our emotions from a bodywork perspective, because we normally use our body more as machines or equipment to get through our daily life and to achieve our tasks, but our body is actually also a really valuable tool to experience emotions or to listen to it in order to see what it tells us about how we feel, how we work, and is therefore also like a bridge to our mental health. And therefore I would also like to introduce these movement sessions in May. And I'm really excited to share them with you. And they will be on Zoom for sure. And if the weather is nice and we have like no restriction on that anymore due to Corona, there will be maybe also the possibility to join the session on Tempelhofer Feld. But yeah, this will be all announced on like in the Facebook event on Instagram. And yeah, if you want to watch the other deep talks which have happened in the last month, you can check them out on YouTube. And yeah, any information coming up concerning the events, they will be shared on the channels you see below. And I think I'm done with my introduction here, and we'll hand over to Maria and Lenny from Osmos Studio and wish you a lot of fun. And yeah, just one more announcement, sorry. I hope you have all some paper and pen because you're gonna need it, probably, if you like to. And regarding questions, there will be a Q&A session in the end of the session, which will take approximately 90 to 120 minutes. If you have any questions in between, you can always use the chat and just chat your questions to the girls and we will take care of it. Okay, have fun.
Thanks, Kati. Yeah, hi. It's nice to be doing the second round now, this time, part 2 of 3. So we're in the middle, and maybe not all of you have attended last time, so we decided we do a very short introduction of ourselves, just so that you have an idea of what we're doing. Yeah, do you want to start? Who you are?
Yeah. Hi everyone, thanks for joining again. I'm Maria, and I have a background in neuropsychology, but I'm offering holistic counseling here at Ōsmos. And I'm also a psychedelic facilitator, so I'm running psychedelic retreats in the Netherlands mostly. And yeah, I've been in Berlin for 3.5 years, almost 4, I think now. And in 2018, we opened Osmos together, and it was a space for us to offer our own like individual sessions, but it was also it is also a space for us to host these kind of workshops. And we do workshops and topics related to relationships and intimacy, also related to altered states of consciousness and psychedelics again. So, and we also always invite or like try to stay open to people, so if maybe any of you also have any ideas or any anything you would like to share, or any workshops, any talks, any topics that you're interested in and you have certain knowledge in and you want to share this with people, we're always open for that. So we've had quite a wide range of things happening here. We've had like sound healing sessions and movement classes and cinema evenings too. So yeah, that's a bit what we do. And maybe now you can tell them what you actually did.
Yeah, I'm Leni. I'm a relationship and sex therapist. We opened the studio together nearly 2 years ago, and since then, we've had many people coming here for different kinds of therapy. We have a third person joining us, and who join us in the studio. She's a massage therapist, and then 2 other therapists joining in May. Yeah, I do mainly couples and sex therapy in all different forms, and I think we're going to dive quite deep into how I work a lot with couples and individuals when it's about how we relate to each other, how we love, how we practice our sexuality, how we can find the patterns in how we relate to others. I think that will be a big topic tonight, so you see a little bit of that work, I think. And before we properly start, we wanted to give you a short recap of what happened last time. If you didn't participate.
So last time we introduced the concept of a map of reality or belief systems, and we explain how these frameworks and how we use them to interpret the world and to make predictions as to what we should expect from people and from ourselves and from the world in general. And we saw how these beliefs many times are created, really early, during our childhood, and how many times they just go unnoticed. Like we never even think about it. We just believe things even though we don't have much evidence or like many arguments, like maintaining them. So we just take them for granted, and they somehow become reality. They somehow like shape what is going to be our reality. So we did some exercises, like we are going to do today. We kind of created that chance for you guys to, to actually reflect on your own experience and to see what comes up for you. Because I think like we both believe like this is like the best way, to learn, when you actually experience it, when you actually kind of like feel it in yourself and see yourself doing something. It's like if you have an experience, you can actually, then put more attention and maybe do something to change it. It doesn't stay so much in this like abstract, like world somehow. And this is also what we're going to try and do today. This is going to be theory, but there is also going to be exercises, so the theory makes more sense. But yeah, that's a bit what we did last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Maria just said, tonight we're also going to do exercises. So you get a pen and paper if you want to participate. And yeah, then you can just get the most out of this session, I think. And yeah, it's going to be super interesting because we dive into attachment styles. So different ways of how we attach to the people that are close to us. And if we look closely, then we can find some patterns. In this, we can find patterns if we keep avoiding getting close to people, if we get really anxious when people are coming closer to us, if we maybe feel both. We feel like we want to avoid closeness, but at the same time we crave it. And there are actually also beliefs, patterns, like we discussed last time, underneath this attachment behavior. But it's also created in our childhood, and we will go back to this a little bit. And getting a better understanding of our attachment styles can really help to make more conscious decisions in our relationships, in our love life, but also with our friends, with our family. And it creates a space in which we can understand ourselves better and act more consciously in the world and with the ones we love. And then afterwards, we will go a little bit into the shadow of Carl Gustav Jung. And maybe some of you have heard already about it. It's quite a big concept about everything that remains unknown or unconscious in our behavior. And we all have that feeling that we have some blind spots here and there. And tonight we're going to do an exercise and try to find out what our blind spots, or at least one of them, and how we can deal with it and how it's influencing our life. And where it comes from, and also that helps to just have a better understanding of how we want to act and take up space in the world, and what kind of people we want to be, and how that can be influenced and shaped.
Yeah. I think something to keep in mind tonight is to, these, even though it's interesting, and even though, maybe in the long term it's going to be helpful and it's going to allow us to relate in like healthier ways to others, it is also quite triggering to realize that maybe you are doing certain things, or maybe that you are like holding certain beliefs, or that maybe the way you were treated by your parents or by your like teachers or by anyone that was close to you might have affected you. So it's like, it is something, it can be quite a triggering experience. So then this is why we want to, tell you that, check in with yourself constantly and see how far you can go. Many times like this kind of work is something that you also do with a therapist, with someone that is close to you and is going to hold the space. So it's, just take extra care and check in with yourself, see how you're feeling, and see how far you can go, and what feels like comfortable enough, or like safe enough for you. And if you have to take some time, out, that's also fine. But yeah, just take it easy in a way, and then afterwards allow for some time or some extra self-care.
Crying, journaling, meditating, cuddling, preparing a hot water bottle to go to bed. All of these self-care things can be helpful.
Definitely.
Let's go into it. Yes. Okay. Tonight we're going to start with a quiz. So get your pen and paper ready. And I'm going to read out 12 statements to you now. And if a statement applies to you, then write down the color, the name of the color that I'm going to say after the statement. So different statements have different colors. I'm reading out the statement and then the color, and if the statement applies to you, just write down the color, and then we're going to analyze it afterwards. So the first statement is, I often tend to merge or lose myself in my partner, feel what they feel or what they want. If that applies to you, write down orange. The second statement is, I do many of life's tasks or hobbies alone, and I have difficulties reaching out when I need help. If this applies to you, then write down blue. This third statement is, I feel comfortable expressing my own needs. If this is true for you, then write down yellow. The next statement is, I sometimes worry that I will be hurt if I allow myself to get close to people. If that statement applies to you, then write down red. Yeah, you go.
I sometimes feel superior in not needing others, and I wish others were more self-sufficient. If that applies to you, write down blue. In an attempt to reestablish connection, I over-adapt, over-function, and over-apologize for things I didn't do. If that applies, write down orange. I am comfortable depending on people and having people depend on me. If that applies to you, write down yellow. When I reach a certain level of intimacy, I sometimes experience inexplicable fear. If that applies, write down red.
I prefer casual sex over a committed relationship. If that applies to you, write down blue. I find it easy to flow between being with my partner and being on my own. If that's true for you, then write down yellow. I often find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. If that's true for you, then write down orange. And the last statement is, safety often feels unreachable. If that's true for you, then write down red. Now you can count your colors. See how often you have written down orange, blue, red, and yellow. And see if maybe one or two are sticking out. The statements that we just read out are taken from a much bigger test on attachment styles. So it is very possible that now there's not one color really sticking out, or you feel like, oh wow, this is all over the place, and I wrote down everything, and I can't really, or I don't really understand right now what my attachment style is. But maybe it gives you a little bit of a tendency to understand yourself, or to at least locate yourself in what we're going to explain now. But if you're interested in understanding your attachment styles better, then you can either talk to your therapist, or you can also try. And there are a lot of tests online where you can see where you are located on the scale, and you can see if that applies to you. But what we just read out, we're going to explain it to you now by the colors, so that you have a better understanding which one you could be and what that means for you and your relationships.
Yeah, maybe we can also share some, maybe afterwards on the Facebook event or something, we can share some links of some questionnaires, because there is like thousands of them. So maybe it's just easier if we just, give you a couple of them, but that we've used, that we know that quite well done and quite well written, and the results are, you can actually believe what they're saying.
Yeah.
But do they want to do it? Do they want to tell them now, or do they want to keep the results for after? Yeah,
I think then it's easier. Yeah.
Okay, so
let it out. Let it out of the box.
So the statements that were yellow, that were like, we use the color yellow for them. These statements are normally related to a secure attachment style. Then we have orange, and that would be like an anxious attachment style, anxious, preoccupied attachment style. Then we have blue, that is called dismissive, avoidant attachment style. And then we have red, and that is fearful, avoidant attachment style. And we will come later to eat more into detail, but as we said, like each attachment style it was formed, because of certain circumstances or certain experiences, and it also comes accompanied by specific behaviors and specific beliefs and specific ways of relating to others, and ways of regulating our own emotions, and ways of asking for our needs to be met, and how we expect our needs to be met by others. But going back to the beginning, like attachment theory, it's been around since the 60s and the 70s, and it was first created as like, it was only focused on children and how children relate to the parents. But then they realized that actually this applies also to adult relationships, not only to children, parent, but also to the relationship that we have with our partners, and the relationship we have with the closer, the people who are closer to us. And what the theory says, or like what the theory says, and like what the research has found, is that human beings, we are social animals. We all everyone kind of like knows this, that we are social animals. We need like social interaction. But then the theory also tells us we need more than this. We need physical and emotional closeness. And this is, of course, it's a primal need, because many times, and still now, it means like we need others to survive. When we are babies, for example, we need others to take care of us. There's no way we can make it if there's no one there to take care of us. So this need for others, this need to be in connection is really intense, and it's really primary. It's really important. It's one of like the biggest needs that we have. And what happens many times is, like through these interactions and through the quality of these interactions with our first caregivers, or our friends, or our siblings, or our teachers, we learn what to expect from the world. So for example, if through these interactions we see, okay, I can predict that there's going to be people that are going to be there for me, there's going to be people who are going to engage with me emotionally, there's going to be people who are going to be there for me when I need them. If something happens, I know I can go back to them. This creates for us, especially, if this happens when we're children, this creates a sense of safety. It tells us, like, if you need something, someone is going to respond. If you have something to share, someone's going to be there to listen to you. So if this happens, in a way that is regular, at some point we create this sense of safety, like physical and mental safety. And it allows us to create a sense of self, like a really grounded and positive and stable sense of self, because it means, okay, there's someone that listens to me. That means that I'm probably worth it. That means I'm probably lovable. That means that, maybe things go wrong, but like the world in general is like a safe, like a trust, trustworthy space in a way. And what this also does is, when everything goes right, and when you have this support, and when you have this attention, and when people like listen to you and they engage with you, then it also helps you to be emotionally, you learn to regulate your own emotions. You learn to like be in touch with your emotions and with your needs. And then it also means that you have this sense of, okay, there is somewhere where I can go if something goes wrong. So then you dare to take risks. You're there to go outside and explore the world. You're there to be like, maybe I'm going to move to the other side of the world because I know I can always come back, or maybe I'm going to, I don't know, go and talk to that beautiful person in that corner because I know if I can always go back to my friends and they're going to be there if it doesn't work out. For example, if this person doesn't want to hang out with me, or like go home with me or something, it's like we know that there is a safe haven for us, so then we take more risk. We're there to go outside. And this all happens when when everything goes well. This is what we would say happens, and this is how a secure attachment style is developed. This is like all of the statements that were like the color yellow. This is how it's formed, because we've had like regular and ongoing support, and we've had like people listening to us, people taking care of our emotions, people like engaging with us. So we develop all of these things. We develop a strong sense of self. We are more confident, we're there to be in the world. We create more experiences. And because we've experienced this, we can also, more easily, when we need something, we can just express it. We can go to someone and say like, hey, I'm not feeling good, or like, hey, I would need for you to come with me somewhere, or I would need to have a chat. Like we believe that this is going to be given to us. And this is what we say, like, this is like the perfect scenario. This is like, the research says that like 50% of the population, it's like this. Like, it's like they are actually secure. They feel that they can trust others. They feel they can depend on others. They are they're comfortable when someone needs their help. They can express what they need. They can connect with their partners, but then also go outside and explore. They can have a strong relationship with their parents, but then again, like, just leave the house and go and move to the other side of the world, for example. What happens many times, like at least 50% of us, is that this doesn't go so well. It's not, we don't have this like utopian kind of like, a scenario, and like we don't have maybe perfect parents, or we haven't had perfect relationships. Maybe everything went well with our parents, but then we had a really bad, like experience when we were teenagers with our first boyfriend or girlfriend, and that kind of like tricked everything and made it a bit more difficult. So when these experiences have happened, when we haven't had people being accessible or reachable, or like engaging with us, like responding to our needs, like many times we develop one of the other styles that we've talked about and that we've seen. And the first one, the orange, like the anxious attachment style, is one that normally means that we are worried. We want connection. We want to be close to people, and we put a lot of importance in being with people. And we are also really sensitive when someone, when this attention or this connection is going to be taken away from us. And when that happens, when there's a hint of like, oh, there's something going, maybe my partner hasn't responded to me the way they normally do, what we do is we become really hyperactivated. We try and like establish that connection again. We worry and we think, oh, maybe I did something wrong, maybe they don't love me, maybe. So we become really agitated, and we try and reestablish that connection no matter what. Like we call them 1,000 times, we message them, we go to the house even if we have to, we we do anything, to try and reestablish that connection. And when it doesn't happen, then we become, we do like what it's like, then we become upset with them, or we threaten to leave them. We say like, okay, you don't love me so much, or we give them this like silent treatments, like, okay, you didn't pick up when I call you, so now I'm going to pretend I'm busy and I'm not going to pick up the phone in like 6 hours, for example. So that are some of the behaviors on this, like, this anxious style. Then we can go to the next one, which would be like avoidant, like dismissive avoidance style, and this is the color blue. And in this case, what they do, or what they try to defend, is the independency. They believe that they have to do everything for themselves, that they believe that a person should be able to take care of themselves and not need others, and your independency is like the most important thing for you. So like, you're really easily triggered when someone maybe seems that it's like, taking a lot of space, or like taking or wanting a lot of your time, for example, wanting to be close to you, or when someone is needing something from you. Many times you become defensive and you try to like be like, no, okay, like you should be able to do this for yourself and not need me so much. Or like, why do you have to call me 3 times a day? So how they react to this many times is like, they try and deactivate, they try and like take the importance away from connection. They try and be like, oh yeah, I don't need others, I can do it by myself, or I don't need the relationship, or and even though it sounds like they're really the opposite, they're like really like different behaviors, at the end they both like come out from the same emotion. There is a fear of connecting, there is a fear of like true connection. They're just using different ways of of staying safe. And for some people it's like, it's easy for me to pretend that I don't need connection with others, and for other people it's like, I need to make sure that this connection is going to be here, because I don't trust that it's actually stable. So there's always this fear related to intimacy and connection. It's just like the ways that they relate to it, like the ways that they try and like, play down this fear, like the ways that they try and stay safe from this fear, they're different. And then the next style is called fearful avoidant, and in this case it's like, we would say like, it doesn't really make sense. Like some people
it's the color red.
Yeah, that's the color red.
It's the color red, if you wrote it down.
So some people say it's like, it's just you go from like pull and push, like you want intimacy, but then you also push away this person. It's like, it's this thing of like, I hate you, but stay here. So it doesn't really make sense it doesn't make sense to you if you have this style. It also doesn't make sense to the people who are around you, because like, okay, they're craving this connection, they want you close to them, but then they will also, when it actually gets close and intimate, they will like also like push away. Or like, if you also have this style, you feel like, okay, I really want to, as Lainey said earlier, I really want and crave this intimacy, but then I'm actually really scared to go out and be in the world. I'm really scared to meet with my friends. I'm really scared to be in a relationship, even though deep down I do crave it. And this style is more complex, and many times it comes from like people who have actually been like traumatized by like the like the early like attachment figures. It comes from maybe like the person who was giving you love sometimes was also the person who was really punishing, like the person who was like violent towards you. So like, this is a more complex style. And for these, I mean, for all of them, but like for this one especially, I think like there is more need of like the help of someone else to actually understand it and to see where your patterns are, where your behaviors are. Maybe I'm going to pass it to you for a bit.
What I think is really important when it comes to attachment styles is that we can have different attachment styles with different people. So not when now you feel like, oh my God, nearly all of this is resonating with me, or I felt like I felt avoidant and I felt anxious in my life, and I was like this in that relationship, but very different in this relationship. That's perfectly normal. And I think that's also really important to keep in mind when it's about these psychological concepts, because they're at the end just a template that help us understand ourselves better, but our actual experience and who we are is so much more complex and deep and rich, luckily. That's what makes life so amazing. But yeah, it's much deeper and more complex. So when we use these templates, and it's always a template when you work with these kind of questionnaires and you try to put people into boxes, then it's really important to keep in mind that it's not as simple as this, but it can be helpful. It can be helpful in guiding you and understanding yourself better. But so yeah, when it comes to attachment styles, we can be so different with our partner, but then maybe you feel very avoidant with your romantic partner, but very anxious with your best friend, and that's perfectly normal. And that's not contradicting each other. That's actually maybe sometimes adding to each other, because you can't be the same with everyone, and different people trigger different fears in you, and trigger different traumatic experiences and childhood memories and all of this in you. So when you look deeper into your attachment styles, then don't be too confused when you feel like, oh my God, this is all me, and I felt and been like this in my life, in different relationships.
Yeah, like Lainey saying, like this is more complex, and there's many exceptions to the rules in a way, and like many times with different relationships or with different people, we take like different roles in a way, and also because these attachment styles, like anything that we do, is like in a dynamic with another person. So it also depends on like how this person is behaving towards you. And like what we say about these styles, for example, is like maybe for a time in your life you were avoidant, or like you were anxious, or you were secure, but it doesn't mean, like, or even if most of your life you've been anxious, for example, and if you say like, no, I know this is my style, this is how I behave with like all of my close people. It's like, it doesn't mean that this is going to stay like this. It's like they're not fixed, and new experiences, I have the power to change them. If for a lot of people, when they, for example, they've been anxious for like most of the time, then they meet someone who can, like who can really like show them that they can be loved and they can be listened to and they can be, supported in a way that feels safe enough. They're able to change to a more, they're able to learn to be secure. So we are all able to learn, to take in this new experience and realize, oh, actually love, or actually closeness or intimacy or friendship can look different than all of the experiences I've had before. We just need to have this person that's showing us different, and we have to be open, to this new different way of loving, of being in a relationship. The problem, when these styles, and the same thing, the same way we were talking about beliefs last time, is like they have power in you as long as they stay, as long as they're in the back, as long as you don't put any awareness into them, and as long as they're in your subconscious, they have, they can play, they can just like guide you, they can like, but the moment you bring certain awareness and the moment you start reflecting on them, they lose a lot of power, and you actually have the opportunity to behave differently.
Yeah, I think that's super important, because sometimes when we realize our styles, we feel like, the fuck am I going to live with this? Oh my God, now I've learned something about myself, and it just makes me feel overwhelmed and it's too much. But we are never stuck in anything, and we can always heal and move away from it and explore it and actually be playful with it. And it can also be very fun to observe yourself and think like, oh my God, I'm doing exactly the same again. My partner has been trying to call me 3 times. I look at the phone, I feel so much pressure that I'm not able to call back because I'm an avoidant type in that example. And then you can also start laughing about yourself. You can express that, you can tell that to your partner and say, actually, I realized I can be really avoidant with these things. I'm going to try and call you back next time you've called me 3 times, but honestly, I feel very pressured when that happens. Can you please just not call me 3 times? There's like a way of making it playful in the relationship, and both of you talking about what your style is and what you need and what is making you feel insecure and what's making you feel secure. And of course, the funny thing is that many times the anxious type is finding the avoidant type, because that goes so well together. They can just have that little dance together in which one is running after the other, and both always feel somehow satisfied in their programs, because that's what they learned how love feels like. You know, one of them feels like, oh, I always have to protect myself from someone coming too close. And the other person feels like, oh, I got to run after something I want. And that's an amazing game we've seen maybe in us or our friends and the people we are close with, but we can always move beyond this. And I really want to spread a lot of hope when it comes to understanding your attachment style. And we're not stuck in it. For sure not.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And it was the same what we said like on the last session about beliefs. You know, many times we find the people who allow us to confirm these beliefs that we have about ourselves, and this is the same. You know, it's like we find people who keep confirming, you know, like those ideas that we have. It's like, and at some point, like we have to stop this. You know, we have to. This is what we have to say. Okay, I'm not gonna keep going for these people. I'm gonna try and like maybe try what's different. You know, and many times like, you know, especially in this like avoidant, anxious kind of like couples, is like it feels really exciting. You know, you go for it because it feels like it's a roller coaster. It's like sometimes you meet and it's amazing, and then at some points like you're like really far away, and then it's like you reconnect again. So it's like you go for the excitement, but then when someone secure comes and actually shows you like, yeah, I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna show you love, on like I'm gonna be constant, I'm gonna be here when you need me, I'm gonna listen to you. If you need reassurance, I'm gonna give it to you. Many times that feels like we even say like, oh yeah, he's a bit boring, you know, they're a bit boring. I'm not really into them. And this is just like because they're showing you something that is different. You know, they're not giving you this like extra, you know, like craziness roller coaster that comes from being so emotionally triggered by someone. So I always say like when you think like someone is boring, it many times also, you know, means that maybe they're actually, you know, just not confirming your beliefs, like your needs for that like emotional, you know, like tension in a way. But yeah, as Lainey was saying, like it is triggering to realize these things about yourself, and it's like we shouldn't get stuck into like these patterns, you know, and then now we're like, oh, we shouldn't be together because like we have these styles, and we shouldn't, you know, it's like let's avoid, you know, tension, let's avoid conflict because we know it's gonna happen. But you know, we shouldn't get stuck in there. And it's like so much. I think what I found for myself was that it was really relieving also to say there is certain behaviors that I'm not the only one who's falling into them. They come from somewhere. Even though they don't make sense to me, they make sense when I look at these things, and when I see that there's actually someone who's like written them down, because a lot of people, like, you know, 20% of the population fall into these things. So now, you know, when you've worked on them and when you've realized it's just not you and they have a meaning, they come from somewhere, so it's quite, it takes a lot of pressure from you. It means like, okay, you're not going crazy, you know. It's like there is a reason for it. And I think also bringing that playfulness when you're doing the work is like really useful. Like what I do sometimes is like when I see one of these patterns coming up, I'm like, wow, just like, wow, you're doing it again after years. You know, you basically use this, you're a therapist, you basically use this and you still catch yourself doing this. So it's like, I just look at my man, I'm like, wow, okay, you really are. And that, you know, that allows me to laugh about it and to like, you know, decrease that emotional reaction and like be able to behave differently in a way. So bringing humor into it really, you know, helps somehow. Yeah.
Shall we move?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If anyone has a question in between to this, then you can also just send it to us in the chat. But otherwise, we will continue with the next exercise. So get back to your pen and paper. And now you can decide if you either want to think of a scenario that you had any time in your life, maybe recently, maybe far in the past, in which you felt you acted completely out of character, where you had the feeling like, was this me? Did I do this? This so doesn't fit me. That so doesn't suit to who I am. And this is not what people would have thought of me, or this is not what I would have thought of myself. Or the other option is that you think of a person that really annoys you, someone you really dislike, someone you really find very annoying when you talk to them. You don't want to see them. You get highly triggered when they enter the room. And maybe just now take some time and think about what of the two options comes easier to you, and maybe you can write down some bullet points. Yeah, what scenario comes to your head, or what person. And then when you found a situation or a person, let's start with a situation in which you felt like you were acting out of character. Try to think about in what ways was it out of character? What in that situation didn't fit to you in your identity and how you usually behave? What was the extraordinary part? And then try to think about what triggered the situation. What made you behave out of character? And then try to remember how you were feeling while the situation was happening. Yeah, if there were feelings connected to it. If so, what kind? If you rather felt numb, if you felt detached or connected to your feelings. And then try to think about how you felt afterwards. How did you feel after behaving out of character? What happened after the situation? And then try to think about how you feel about this situation now that you're reflecting on it. Are you in touch with feelings? Does something come up in you? How do you see it now? What are you thinking about it? And then when you've chosen the other option, when you thought about a person that really annoys you, or that triggers you, or makes you upset or angry, then try to think about what is it about that person that is so triggering? What do you react to so strongly? What are they annoying you with? What are they upsetting you with? And then try and think about if you maybe know another person who has similar character traits, who also annoys you. And then try to feel in your body when you think of that person, how that makes you feel. What kind of feeling is coming up, how your body feels. Maybe what thoughts or sentences come to your mind. And then when you've thought about these things, try to come back to this reality here. The person that annoys you is most probably not in your house. Maybe they are. These are 2 exercises with which we can enter our shadow. That's the second part of our session today, Carl Gustav Jung's concept of the shadow. And we're going to explain you in a bit how you can enter your shadow by these 2 exercises. But before we do this, I'm going to explain you a little bit what that actually means, the shadow. And it's a really nice metaphor, I think, that was found for that part of your psyche that remains in the unknown, that remains unseen. So basically you can think of your shadow just as much as you can think of the shadow that falls behind you when you stand facing the sun. So with our eyes, we can only see that part around us, you know, the view that we have. But there's a part of us we'll never be able to see our back. We'll never be able to see the back of our legs. And the same goes for our psyche. We have a conscious part of our psyche with which and that many times feels like that is us. This is ourself. This is how we operate in the world. This is what we know about ourselves. This is how we describe ourselves when other people ask, who are you? What are you doing? The older we get, the more we have an understanding of ourselves. And that's partially related to because we get more and more aware of our shadow, but mostly just because with age we get to know ourselves better. But then there's also this part of us that's in the unknown. And Carl Gustav Jung calls it the shadow. Freud called it the unconscious. He speaks about it in a much broader term. It's actually Freud's birthday today. Rest in peace. Happy birthday. Yeah, so the shadow is everything that we don't see about ourselves. And how does it actually happen that there are parts of us that we don't see? You know, why is that the case? And how does that develop in our life? And when we grow up in our family, in our society, there are certain emotions and certain kinds of behavior and certain kinds of ways of thinking or expressing ourselves, which are tabooized and are not allowed. So for example, if we look at it on a societal level, then many times we are asked to suppress anger. So the angry parts of us, and anger is a very healthy emotion, is very necessary for our survival, but the angry parts in the course of civilization get pushed at least underneath the rug in the best case, but many times somewhere in a box in the last corner of our psyche, and it's not allowed to come out because we get punished every time. You know, when you're a child and you're in kindergarten and you hit your friend, or you throw sand in their face, then you can be sure that someone is coming, punishing you, telling you off, that you're not allowed to do this. So we don't really get told how to deal with our anger. We rather get punished for expressing it. And then with time, because we don't want to be punished, we understand that anger is something that needs to be suppressed. Depending on in which society, and that's more for one gender than for the other. In the culture that we are raised in, and I think in most cultures actually, but there are some exceptions, women are asked to suppress their anger more than men, or they're expected to be more harmonious. And then over time, we develop like a second self, maybe an underlying motivation of why we're doing things the way we're doing them. And that's because the emotions that we were suppressing, they need to come out in some ways. And the shadow cannot only be something negative. I use anger now as an example, because most of the time we are taught to suppress emotions that are considered being negative. You know, that might be deep sadness, anger, resentment, jealousy, envy, you name it, whatever comes to your mind. Assertiveness, many times, that's another thing. But it can also be that we have character traits or characteristics in our shadow that are considered being positive. You know, for example, if you're raised in a family in which money is very tight, and you start giving your your lunch you got for your school break to your friends, your mom might be punishing you for it afterwards and be like, this is what I gave for you, you should keep it to yourself, don't give it, don't share with anyone else. Then your capacity to share and your empathy for other people and their needs can be part of your shadow, because you've never been allowed to express it, and then they can come out in sometimes unhealthy, but at least exaggerated ways. Because that's the thing with the shadow, the suppressed emotions that we don't allow to be because they don't fit to our identity. You know, for example, and this is what this exercise is pointing towards to when it's about when did you act out of character. And an example could be that you say, once I smashed 2 plates on the wall because I got so upset in an argument with my partner or friend. And that was completely out of character, because usually I always want harmony. I just want peace. I never want conflict. And this is actually your shadow coming out. This is the shadow that's all the aggression and the anger and the resentment that you don't really allow yourself to feel, because it doesn't fit to your ideal of you being a peaceful, harmonious person. That in a moment when you're triggered, it comes out in a way that feels very demonic. It can feel like another entity is taking over me. It's guiding my actions. I'm not present. I don't know what's happening at the moment. And then afterwards, I feel like a hangover from it. And I feel like, my God, what the fuck did just happen? That wasn't me. And you apologize, and you don't even know what you apologize for, because it actually feels like it was in a dream, or it was a different person who did it. And with the example of the person who has learned to never share, it could be that in a moment when the shadow is triggered, they start to give everything away they have. You know, maybe they start giving away all of their clothes, and they just give everything they have, and they feel like there's nothing I need. Everyone should have everything. And they end up feeling like, why do I spend all my money? Why do I give everything I have to people I don't even know? And that could be because that's part of your shadow. So when we are not really in check of our shadow and the suppressed emotions and the things that our parents taught us to not do, that society tells us to not do, we sometimes act on autopilot. So we do in a normal day-to-day setting, when we're not really triggered, we just behave in the ways we want to behave. We consider ourselves as, I feel like I'm civilized, I have my life under control. Here and there's some things I could do better, but overall I'm fine. And then all of a sudden something happens, and you feel like, why did I do this? I don't understand it. This is painful for me to see. Or sometimes it's actually relieving to see that this can also be a part of you. What would be another example would be, for example, that a person who has learned to never assert himself or herself, that it's better to stay calm and quiet and never speak their truth and never speak their needs, that they find it quite relieving when their shadow of assertiveness comes out, maybe more stronger than necessary, but at least it's coming out, and they feel that, oh wow, I can actually stand up for myself. That can be really healing. But the idea behind it, especially in therapy, is that we create a big understanding of what is actually our shadow, what are the parts that we have pushed to the side, that we're not allowed in our own individual childhood and for us individuals in our society. And that can be very different. If you have siblings and you look at your siblings, you'd be surprised how different that could have played out in different families. Maybe one sibling gets to be angry all the time and for them it's fine, and the other person is not allowed to be angry at all because that role is already taken. So it goes much deeper than just looking in your family and saying, in my family no one is really angry or something. And that can be the case. We have family narratives, we have family shadows, group shadows, society shadows, individual shadows. And you can go into very different layers, but maybe the exercise we did with that situation where you felt acting out of character can be helpful for you to discover some of the things that you don't allow yourself to feel or behave in day-to-day settings. And
I think a really common experience maybe is when we see ourselves doing something that something that our parents, for example, used to do, and we promise ourselves we're never going to behave this way, and then you catch yourself doing that and you're like, oh my god, I've literally spent I've put so much effort into not doing this, and then it just happens and it comes out. It's like many times this is again because probably because it hurt you so much that they were behaving this way, because you saw how it hurt them, that you were like, I'm so not gonna do this, so you pushed it so much away that then still somehow it found its way out. It found a way. You didn't want to look at it. You repress those feelings in yourself, healthier feelings, but in the same direction. You just repress them because it scare you to feel like, okay, if I allow myself to, for example, get angry, it means I'm gonna be full of rage, like my father, for example. So I'm not even gonna allow myself to feel any kind of anger. So you also push it away, and then this is how it comes up. It's not only that they didn't allow you to do it, but sometimes you made that decision of not allowing yourself to do it somehow because you saw it in them. And I think it's super common. And I mean, I hear it many times, I'm just doing what I never wanted to do, for example. And I think a way that the shadow and attachment theory can merge.
Maybe we go back to this in a second.
Okay.
Just because we have this the other, before we bring it together, with the other scenario when it's about the person that really annoys you, because that's another way of understanding your shadow. Now this is painful, this is what I'm going to say now is really painful because that's the least thing we want. Many times when a person is really annoying and triggering to us, it's because that's a part of us that we see a part of ourselves in them, and we get so annoyed with that part of us that we project it onto the other person and react so strongly to it because we've pushed that part in us so far away from who we are that we need to put even more distance between us and that person when we see it in someone else. So for example, if someone is annoying you by asking for a lot of things. If someone is asking, can you help me with this? Can you do this? I'm moving on the weekend. Could you do this? Actually, I need help with repotting my plants. And also, I'm really sad. Could you call me? I need a call. If that, for example, is annoying to you, and there are so many other things people can be annoying with, but that, for example, could point towards that you don't allow yourself to be needy, that you don't allow yourself to ask for help. And then when you see it in someone else, that part of you that's repressed gets so triggered that you have to put even more distance between you and that part, and you just get annoyed and you don't even want to look at this person because it reminds you of something in you that you don't want to see and you don't want to be part of your identity. So with that exercise, try to see what are the emotions that are so annoying to you in that person. And then ask yourself that really hard question, asking, do I maybe not like that part of myself? Have I repressed being jealous, needy, selfish, egoistic, cocky? You know, these are all things that can annoy us a lot, but to make it maybe even more like, yeah, to maybe show how that works is that one person can be so triggering for you, but not triggering at all to your friend. And you don't understand why. You know, you and your friend, you're so close and you're like, what? I hate this person and you like them? I don't understand. And that's because we hate or we like and dislike different parts of ourselves to different extents. And what is triggering to us is not necessarily triggering to the other person, because they maybe are more in touch with that part of themselves that is represented by that specific person you don't like. So yeah, you maybe more people come to your mind that you struggle with or that trigger you, and they can be a guide towards your own shadow in the parts of you that you don't really like. No.
I think it can also I think it can also happen that, you know, someone reminds you of an old self, you know, like you've done some work and you've come out of certain behaviors, certain patterns that you were, you know, that you were seeing in yourself that you didn't like at all, that put you in situations that weren't good for you, and you've just come out of it. And because it's such a, this new self who's not doing that, it's so fresh and so new and so kind of like still unstable maybe, you know, when you see someone is still doing these same things, that you get really triggered because it reminds you of that old person or that old self that you don't want to be and you don't even want to have like next to you, because the pain, you know, from being like that is still really close. So you know, because it's so new, you don't have patience still for others, you know, that are still in that process and that maybe still need more time to come out of it. So I think that's also something that happens really often. It's like, it's not even that this person is pointing to things that you still see in yourself, or like that were like part of yourself in like past, like a recent past maybe, or like also like a, you know, past, but it's still quite triggering for you. And what I wanted to say earlier, it's gonna be ahead, is that how, you know, attachment styles, like attachment needs, or and the shadow can like merge together, and how this whole thing also like merged with beliefs, is that they all come out, you know, they all like are activated when we are triggered. You know, when everything is calm, we can have them, but you know, they just stay kind of like dormant in a way. But when something happens, or someone, you know, comes into our lives that is able to trigger them, this is when they come out. You know, many times it's in moments of, especially with attachments, in moments of fear, it's in moments of uncertainty, it's in moments when there's a lot, you know, out there, there's a lot that we could lose maybe, or that a lot that we're putting into a certain person or a certain situation, then this is when we're more easily triggered. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it from us, isn't it? I think we can start with the Q&A session, if you have any.
Yeah, like last time, I think it's easier if you just type it in the chat, and then we can read them out loud, or we can just read them and give an answer. Maybe you read.
What is a good way of dealing with your shadows after you discover them? Yeah. Oh, how can I close this? Yeah, that's a good question, because this is actually really the feeling we have as soon as we discovered our shadow. We're like, oh my God, and now I need to do something about this, because this is really not what I want to be part of my identity. And I think the biggest step in integrating our shadow, because that's actually the only thing we can do, the integration of the shadow is what helps us heal, and in not sure if I said that last time, but in the English language, the root of the word holy and the word whole is the same. So a person who's holy is actually an integrated person, someone who's whole, who has integrated all of their parts and who's aware of their parts and who's aware of how evil we can be. You know, all of us human beings can be evil and dismissive and hurt other people. And in order to be holy, you need to be aware of this and have it in check. So the integration of the shadow, I think the first and biggest step, and I think the hardest actually, is to create an understanding that because we are humans, nothing of these negative things can go away. We have, like, we live with them. They're part of us as much as our caring, giving, loving sides. And that can be really, really hard to accept, but it also really opens our heart to the experience for everyone else. Because when we understand that we can be as mean and evil and dismissive and hurtful as we sometimes experience as other people, we understand more where they're coming from. We see how connected we are with them. We see that they're humans as much as we are humans, and that helps to heal a lot. So when you discover your shadow and you say, like, okay, now I found like maybe 4 or 5 blind spots of mine that I wasn't aware of, then try to put your attention on them. Try to see when they pop up mildly or on a medium level or highly in your day-to-day life, and try to act them out in a positive way. So for example, if you've understood that anger is something you repress, but then you get furious every 3 months when you're driving a car and someone is taking over or something, you know, is cutting you off. Or if you get furious with a friend or a partner for a tiny thing, then you can integrate your shadow, because your shadow then is, I'm not allowed to be angry, by allowing yourself consciously to be angry. And I practice this with my clients, and that sounds ridiculous, but I really practice it by punching a pillow, punching your mattress, and just allow yourself to scream these emotions out. And then when you've let them out in a way that feels safe to you, you can slowly start expressing them to other people. And you can start showing your anger and say, like, I'm actually angry now. I'm going to leave the room for a few minutes because I don't want to take it out on you, but this is how I feel, and then I'll come back and we can talk about it, for example. Or you confront someone with your anger and you say, yeah, you hurt me, that makes me angry, like, let's talk about it. And when we learn to understand that when these emotions pop up at the moment they pop up, then they don't need to build up to a moment where we get where we become very rageful or where we get furious, but we can express them and then let them go and move on to the next. So the integration works by understanding that's part of me and will always be part of me. So therefore I allow myself to feel it. I give it actually a hug. I thank this feeling that it's there. It's part of me. Thanks, you know, for sharing that same house with me. And then learn to help release it and act it out in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think what you just said about giving it a hug, it's quite telling, because many times what we have to do is create a kind of friendly relationship with it. You know, it's like many times I hear people saying, like, you know, it's a monster. You know, it's like there is a monster. There's like, I become a monster. There's like, you know, this is like the bad side of me, and it's like there is this thing of like what we try to do is like put these negative traits, how we call them, in a cage, you know, and really try and like put them away. And it's like maybe what you have to do, so this monster, what you're calling it, like, you know, it's like you have to be more friendly with it and actually like look at it and ask what it is it needs. You know, it's like this rage, we just need to be expressed when it's only just anger, you know, when it hasn't grown into this like bitter, you know, like intense and explosive experience. You know, it's more that thing, like, don't be scared of it, like, don't be afraid of the shadow, because you can actually create like a more friendly connection with them, like, and establish a conversation. You know, it's like, okay, I see you, you're there, I hear you, and I know that if I don't pay attention to you, you're going to come out and you're going to cause some harm. So let's just talk now, because I actually have the capacity to hold the space and have that conversation. Yeah.
We have another question. Do you think parts of your personality in shadow changes if you are a therapist and work with many clients or patients? Yeah. I hope I'm getting it right.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Do you think parts of your personality in shadow change if you're a therapist and work with many? Yeah. I think I'm understanding it in the way that the more you work with clients, the more you discover your own shadow and you work through it, and then you come out on the other side and then you discover a new shadow part of you. So as in, like, as a therapist, you just get to know more parts of your shadow. Is that what you're asking? Or can we get a confirmation? But maybe to talk about it in general. I mean, like, therapists have their very own shadows. We have to be very aware. Like, there's a reason why we choose that job. And being a therapist comes with a lot of shadow parts. I think, you know, there's this ideal that you want to assist healing. There's sometimes a power relation between therapist and client. There's this dependency idea, and these are all parts of our shadow. So I think, especially as a therapist, it's extremely important to be in check of your shadows and understand why you do the things you do. And if you're trying to overpower your clients, or if you're trying to create an overly depending relationship with one another, so that they keep coming back and you feel needed and you feel like you are the one who's rescuing them and everything, you know, there's, like, I think, a big bag of shadow work in therapy. And especially the early psychoanalysis, like Freud and Jung, they were really fucked up with it, because they themselves were not analyzed. You know, they invented the whole psychoanalysis, but they just practice it instead of being on the receiving side. So there was a lot of shadow going on there, and they had a lot of sexual relationships with their clients. And so I think, as a therapist, I think your shadows change just as much as they change for other people when you start looking at them and you start healing and integrating them. So I guess for me, I can say my shadow used to be different a few years ago. Still, I have traces of that for sure, but I've discovered even more parts of myself where I was like, oh, I didn't know I'm like this. But at the same time, and that's really important to say, is that especially when you have false beliefs about yourself, or low self-esteem, or you grew up in an environment which was really particular, then also very positive traits of us can be in our shadow. You know, sometimes people come to you and they say, like, you always bring so much positive energy to the room, and it can feel like, is it me? I bring positive energy to the room. I always feel so low. But that can be part of your shadow, that the good parts of you, the joy, the smile, the laughter, you don't really recognize because you only see the darkness in you. So that's important to have in mind. It's not so easy to say it's just the negative, and the positive is always known to us.
Yeah, I think also going back to the question of, like, being, you know, how the shadow is present in the therapy room, I think it's not only related to the relationship between, like, the therapist and the client, but also just due to the deepness of the connection, and, like, how deep this person, like, it's, you know, how deep the things that this person is sharing are, you know, it's like, and I think that happens with, this is also why, of course, the shadow and our attachment style is going to be triggered by those who are close to us, you know, because the relationship is deeper. And I think in this, you know, in these cases, when someone is sharing deeper truths, like deeper experiences, like also like painful experiences for themselves, like, there is more chances of them triggering something in you, not because of the relationship itself, but just because of the story, because maybe it reminds you of something similar that you experienced with, you know, someone in your past, like someone in your present, you know, also it's like, or a relationship that you have with someone in your life, you know, that is not even in the room, but it's just, you know, what they're telling you reminds you of this that you're sharing. So I think, like, this is also something that happens, and I think this is also why close friendships, you know, like having friends who actually share with us, or like who takes us, you know, take us with them into this, like, journeys of, like, inner and deep self-exploration, can also many times, you know, like, help us work with the shadow, and, like, they can trigger us, but they can also really allow us to do that work, for example. So I would say, yeah, as a therapist, if you want to do the work, it's kind of like constant, you know. It's like sometimes it's exhausting to just be like, oh, come on, I felt something, now I have to do something about it, because then it means that there's something that requires my attention, for sure.
I think we have another question. Last time you talked about the good girl, good boy feeling behavior. Could you tell us a bit more about where it comes from? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it has multiple sources and multiple reasons why some of us go into the good boy, good girl behavior. And I think what comes first to my mind, at least, is that you get rewarded when you are a good boy or a good girl. And life is rewarding you. Teachers are rewarding you. Your parents are rewarding you. That reward is not very attractive to everyone. Some people feel they get more rewarded and they get more attention by explicitly not being a good boy or a good girl. But when you think about it in your life, and you are a first row student and you always do your homework and you clean the dishes when you're at home and you are always calm and you never upset your parents or your teachers, then that can be really rewarding, at least from authority figures. That maybe puts you in a place of being rejected by your peers. Many times it's not very accepted to be a good boy or good girl with your peers. There's more the rebellious side of you that's rewarded. But it also, of course, depends on your circle of friends and everything. But authorities and teachers, parents, caregivers, they're the most important people in our early childhood, in our early lives, because we depend on them. So if they reward us for functioning well, for being a good girl, a good boy, then we learn that this is what helps us in life and how we can succeed and how we can make people like us.
I think sometimes we can relate it to the anxious attachment style, because we think, like attention and love wasn't, it wasn't something stable. We had to always work for it. We had to, try and not annoy them, try and have the best grades at school, try and, have all of the answers and do our homeworks and clean the house. And we learn, as long as I do this, I will be able to get their love. Many times we say, if your children, for example, if have, they're able to come at you and tell you okay, right now, you're really pissing me off, or I'm not going to make my bed, or I don't want to do this, is because they feel safe enough. They feel secure enough that they can actually go against you. They know, I can disagree with my parents. I can show them that I'm different. I can disagree with my friends because they're still going to love me. And that means that someone feels secure. That means that someone doesn't have to walk on eggshells to maintain that love and connection. They know it doesn't matter. I can be myself, which many times means I'm not going to be the good boy or girl all the time. And it's still okay. I don't have to fear repercussions. So I think that's also where it could come from, for sure. Do we have more?
I think we have two more. How can we change our attachment style if we identified it and dislike it? How can I develop a more secure attachment style? Disliking our attachment style. I know this.
We all know.
So one way of changing your attachment style is coupling up with a secure attached person. That actually helps, and that's amazing, I think, because
also being friends with someone,
or being friends. You don't have to be in a relationship with them, but have people in your surrounding who are securely attached helps us to become more and more securely attached. And I think that's an amazing trick of our psyche or nature or our behavior patterns, is that when a person with a disorganized or insecure attachment style and a person with a secure attachment style come together, the one with an insecure attachment style will tend more and more to the secure attachment style. So if you're working through these things with your friends, and you maybe have one or two close friends, or partners who can help you see your attachment style and show you that even when you're acting out, I stay, then we can heal with this. But I think another part is the awareness and really observing ourselves. And then the more we observe ourselves and the more often we can really detect the situations where these attachment styles come out, we create more space for us to behave differently. So if you tend to be really anxious, then, and you didn't know this up until tonight or your last therapy session or whenever you find out about this, then you keep on being anxious all the time, calling someone, messaging them, not really understanding what's happening, just being full of fear. But then the moment they actually come back, you start resenting them and you withdraw. Then you're caught in this unconscious cycle. But now that you know it and you've read about it, then the next time you'll be in this fearful state, at least you will feel like, oh my God, is it this? Maybe that's this. Maybe this is how it feels when I do it. And the more often you recognize this, the more often you'll be able to say, actually, no, if I look at the situation, the other person is not withdrawing. They just haven't replied in half a day. It's all fine. I can soothe myself. I don't need to be anxious. I'm going to make a different decision now. And that's how you can move more and more towards a secure attachment style.
It's really what you just said now. I learn to soothe myself. That is really important. That it's like, and it will happen, like for you, from now until you actually change your attachment style, it might take a while, or maybe, you see like, okay, I'm doing amazing for 6 months and then something happens and I'm back on it, and someone comes and it's even more triggering and I fall back in certain old behaviors. It's like, it is a process, and it is many times a long process, because I always say, like, you've had like, for example, I'm 30, let's say I had like 26 years or 27 years to practice certain behaviors and to behave in certain ways. So I have to put a lot of effort, until I learn to behave differently. So during this process, learning to soothe yourself is a really important step, because you can, okay, I get triggered, but instead of like having to call 5 times, I'm gonna maybe see, okay, what can I do? Is it something that helps me? Like, maybe I need to put some music on and dance in my house. Maybe I have to call a friend, or maybe I have to drink a nice cup of tea, or draw something, or just like go for a walk, or meditate. It's like, find ways that you can calm your system, because like what's happening is that your nervous system is just activated. There's like extra energy there, so you have to find ways for like bringing it down to a baseline, to a way that feels like calmer and safer in a way. And of course, what Lainey said, like, we learn by being with others. We learn by having different experiences, and maybe having someone who's able to sit with us when we're being, like calling 5 times, and then they're able to respond and be like, hey, I was in a meeting, I'll call you in half an hour, Or it's like, we learn by just by having a different experience, and by realizing that life and love and relationship doesn't have to be the way it's been until now. But for that, we have to find these people who are going to show us different. And there was another one.
Yeah, we have, I think, we have 3 even. Yeah. Where does the fear of connection come from in avoidant types?
So, for example, in dismissive avoidant types, comes from, it can happen that there's like 2 major scenarios that can create a dismissive avoidant type, like a style. And one of them can be that you grew up in a house where your parents were over controlling. They were always on top of you. They always told you, they told you what to do. You weren't allowed to really express yourself. They had opinions about everything. And so it's like you couldn't develop as an individual. You didn't have any freedom to be who you are and who you were, who you wanted to be. So then you become really like focused on your own independency. You want that independency, and you feel that if someone comes and wants to be intimate with you, what they're going to do, is they're going to take that independency away, because this is what your parents, your attachment figures did to you. They love you, but they love you in a way like too much. They were over, like on top of you. They didn't allow for that a space for you to develop and to be who you were and to express your own needs and your own wishes. So that can be one thing. And another thing can be that, as a child, you wanted your parents' attention, for example, and you tried to get it, and you tried to talk to them, you tried to show them your drawings, you tried to tell them how you felt, but they were really dismissive. They weren't there. They didn't pay attention to your emotions. They didn't pay attention to you. They just didn't have time for you. Maybe sometimes even, they send you every summer somewhere because they just didn't have the time to be with you, and they send you to boarding school or something. And that for you, at some point you decided to not need that connection, because this is the way that you could kind of like avoid this frustration and disappointment. It's like, okay, if I tell myself I don't need this, I will stop trying to get it. I will stop trying to connect with them, which means I'm not going to be disappointed again. They're going to be able to help me anymore. So then, of course, acknowledging I actually do have a need for connection with someone is really scary for you, because it means that this person has the power now. It's in the position now of like giving it to you or not. What you're expecting is that this person is not going to give it to you, so then you're going to be hurt again. So you choose to stay away from that.
Is our shadow related to our intuition? If it is so, how it happens? Well, is it related to our intuition? Well, the only way I could. This is. Well, you got us. You got us. I think how I can think of how it could be related. It's something I've never thought about before, and I feel that intuition is an amazing topic that I'm reading about, and I'm so interested in. And I feel like still like there's so many gaps that we don't really understand how our intuition is formed. But how I can see it being related is that I think our intuition makes use of the fact that we have an understanding for everything that's human and for everything that can happen in us already through the collective unconsciousness, through epigenetics, through our own learning, through the shared human being experience. We create a gut feeling about how things could be, how people are behaving, why people are behaving a certain way, how different kind of behavior patterns play out together, and then create a scenario. I think that comes from that deep understanding that at the end we can understand it all on some level. And that is related to the shadow, I think, in the sense that the shadow is just a part of us that makes us whole at the end. So we need to use that also to use our intuition. But that's my ad hoc answer now. Without having ever thought about it, but this is how I could see a relation. Yeah. In school, when I was very young, I experienced racism and not being popular, also mobbing on myself at 6th, 7th grade. I discovered that this negative experience still now affects my understanding of appreciation and affects relationships. The shadow that came out of it, is, I have to do a lot for love. How can I break this? Yeah.
I think that's already the first step, to know where it comes from, to know that, it happened, it happened when you were a child, it happened when you were in school, and it happened because you were bullied, or because you were underappreciated, or like because there was racism towards you. I think that's already a step, that tells you like, okay, this belief was created in this specific situation. I think that allows for more work into it, for more like, okay, does it apply to my actual, to my present life circumstances right now? Have I experienced something different maybe?
I think that I think what Maria just said is really important, that you keep checking in, asking yourself, am I time traveling at the moment with what I'm experiencing, or am I actually in my reality? And is it still true that I have to work hard for love? But this is not so easy to change, these underlying ideas about us. That goes back to also the belief systems we talked about last time. Yet it is possible, and we can do it. And I think how we can do it, and that's really hard to be done by ourselves. It either has to be in the surrounding of someone we love, friends, partners, or in the surrounding of a therapist. Because how we can go into this is that the underlying belief that you have is that I'm unlovable, therefore I have to work very hard to be able to be loved at least a little bit. And to heal this, you have to go very deep into this feeling of being unlovable. And that can be in a therapy setting or with a partner, and really allow yourself in a situation when it comes up, dive into it, give your body some support by holding your chest and your back. Maybe when you feel like I'm lovable, it's coming up, I'm unlovable, where does it sit in my body? Breathe through it and experience how it can go through your body, this emotion, and how it doesn't get stuck when you don't suppress it. And when you do that often enough, and when you allow yourself to feel it often enough, and you can see that you come out on the other side, you make more and more space for the feeling that at the end you are actually lovable. But that's a process that doesn't happen overnight. It's so tiny little experiences where you allow this feeling of unworthiness, not being able to, and not being allowed to receive love, can flow through your body, leave your body, and leave some calm. And in that calm, there's a sense of worthiness. But that is
totally.
work. Yeah.
And then also, the moment there's a sense of worthiness, the moment there's more calmness, and you have the space and you have the energy to actually go out for those experiences that Lainey said. Like, you need different experiences, you need, or maybe sometimes to even just like pay attention to all of the times that people show love to you, that your friends show love to you without you do anything for it. To actually see, okay, there is times when I'm not doing anything and still I'm being shown appreciation, like someone gets in touch with me, or someone like brings me some flowers, or someone like just calls me, or someone just like, sometimes we're not aware of these things happening around us because we are still like so focused into the other side, and so busy with putting energy into doing all of these things to gain this love, that we don't see that sometimes love just comes to us, So
I think 2 more questions. Yeah. Does attachment tend to be universal, or is there a clear relationship between attachment and culture? There's not a clear, but there is a relationship between attachment and culture, 100%. Yet our individual experience is at the end individual, and we break out of our culture in many ways. But yeah, what our culture tells us what is acceptable and what is not, and how we should behave in situations when we feel unlovable or under pressure, and everything plays a big part in attachment theory. And yes, for sure, it's influenced by your culture.
I mean, the needs for attachment, the needs for closeness, both physical and emotional, and for social contact, is universal. We say like it is part of us as a human species, for sure. But then, of course, it is molded by the culture, and we have to say that with attachment it's not even like so much about the experience itself as like how it is perceived. It's like how we perceive something to be, how how available, how accepting, how supportive I perceive the people around me to be. Many times it's not so much about reality, but how I perceive them to be. So this is maybe in a specific culture, one person, maybe like in general, like the people from this culture kind of like adapt to the ways, they are like shown love, for example, like shown acceptance, like support. But then there is someone who has like different needs, and for them, like they perceive this as not being supportive, as not being accepting, and it's not being like lovable, you know. It's like and then this is going to create like certain wounds and certain difficulties for them, because this is related to how you as an individual perceive this to be.
I think the last question. Romantic relationships can be such a big opportunity to heal together. Yeah, words. They can, really. How does one avoid changing from confident to savior, helper, opponent if the other doesn't want to face their shadow or heal and is acting super avoidant? Yeah, then this is then when it becomes hard to heal together. If not both are in that same mind state at that time. How do you deal with this? Come to couples therapy.
Doing promo.
So the thing is, in anxious avoidant relationships, is that this scenario that you're describing is really common. The anxious one is really trying to heal and look at the pattern. And even in the attachment books, you can find that joke that it's usually the anxious attached person who's reading that book, and the avoidant attached person wouldn't touch that book because they don't want to have anything to do with it. So that what you're describing is actually something that's really that happens quite often, and it's really painful. I feel it's really important to acknowledge that this pattern can be so frustrating and painful, and seeing that this dynamic is actually part of the bigger attachment dynamic. So it's part of the avoidant one to be avoidant and not wanting to heal and not wanting to look at it, and it's part of the anxious attached one to keep wanting and trying to find solutions and trying to make the other person to listen. So trying to see that this is just part of the bigger dynamic, and that it's about, at the end, what we can do is healing ourselves. We can't heal the other person. We cannot make anyone change their behavior. And that's, sometimes this feels like a sad truth, but I think that's also so relieving, because it means no one else can make us change either but ourselves. So if you find yourself being anxiously attached and you're suffering from it, and it's like if we have an insecure attachment style, that means suffering many times, then try to look at your side of it and what you can do, ways that you can soothe yourself, ways in which you can find peace and comfort, maybe with other friends, not with your partner, by calling them. Maybe you can get a stuffed animal you can cuddle in these moments, and that sounds ridiculous, but it helps a lot. And the calmer you get, the calmer also the dynamic gets between the two of you. And I'm not saying that it's in the responsibility of one partner. I don't mean that at all. I think it's in the responsibility of both partners, or like friends or whatever, to do this work. But sometimes in a relationship, one person is in a place where they can look at it and the other isn't. And yes, that feels super unfair, and we wish we would be at the same place. But I think that's also the beauty of relationships, that in some areas we pull the other, whereas then we get pulled by the other in other areas. So if you're the avoidant or the anxious one and you want to work on it and your partner doesn't, then let it be it for now and work on your side of it. And you'll see that the whole dynamic can slow down, and that creates a space for the other person to also move away from their fearful reaction to what they perceive as a threat. And that creates more patience and calm. But self-care in this time, because that can be really exhausting.
And it's what Lenny says, there is a lot that you can do, with your share in this dynamic. You can work on yourself, you can work on how you communicate your needs, how you understand their own behaviors, and how you react to their behaviors. We can help each other out, where we can calm ourselves and the other person just by being next to us. And when you work on yourself, also with the relationship with your parents, for example, many times I think we also see this as like, we are working and we are going to therapy, we're doing all of this inner exploration, and then our parents are still stuck in their own, in the same behaviors that they've been stuck in for years. And this can be really frustrating, but many times, and we want to show them, we want to tell them, do this, read this. If you were more aware of these, things would be different. But it's like they just don't have the tools or the capacity to do it. But you behaving differently, many times we offer them the chance of, of also reacting different to our behavior. and it can still be frustrating. You know, sometimes they might just be able to give us, you know, what they can give, and that's all they can do, and it will still be frustrating. I think in the case of a relationship, sometimes we also have to see like, okay, have I reached a point where I actually can't do this anymore? You know, it's like,
yeah,
you know, sometimes we also have to take that decision and be like, you know, we could be together if we're both like, you know, ready to do the work, but for whatever reason, we're just not ready to do this. You know, we're not a space or like a place where we can do it. So sometimes you do have to take that decision of saying like, yeah, I can't do this anymore, and I have to end this relationship. I think that's it. No more questions for today?
Yeah. Kati, shall we give it back to you?
I think she's on it already.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, can maybe wait for another 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are some last questions you want to ask the girls, let them out now. I will start already saying thank you so much. Tonight. I think we could all take a lot from it. And yeah, maybe you can also give a little more information on the upcoming session in 2 weeks. What's happening there?
Yes.
Oh, question.
One question. What is the difference between an avoidant person and a narcissist? Because both try to be independent, right? Yeah. That's a huge topic, because the word, I mean, narcissist and narcissism has been super popular on the internet, and
we use it really easily. You know, we just drop that, you know, word, you know.
Yeah.
And many times without actually understanding what, you know, what it means. It's in its fullness, you know. And
well, a narcissist is a pathological.
Yeah, it's a condition.
It's a condition.
Yeah, and it can, you know, it can go to an extreme of just not even being able to differentiate that the person next to you has their own mind and their own feelings and emotions. You know, it can come from the point that if you feel you're sad, the other person has to feel sad, for example. You know, it's like you are not even able to have this, like, what we call theory of mind, and see that there is someone that is next to you but has their own set of emotions and feelings and beliefs. You know, so it is quite a big thing. It's quite as I said, like a word that we, you know, use too easily, and maybe we should learn to be more careful with it. So there is, you know, many differences between a narcissistic and an avoidant person, even though they might share that thing of that need for independency.
But in an avoidant person, it's not pathological. I mean, it creates suffering, and we can really we could talk like for weeks about what is pathological and what needs to be diagnosed, and, you know, what's the differentiation, and that's a big topic in psychology and therapy. But if you look at it, an avoidant person doesn't really execute pathological behavior. They just tend to be avoidant with other people, and they cherish their independence, but they don't cherish it at the cost, or to that extent, at the cost of other people, or at the cost of the empathy or like connection in general. So there's I think it's not only in the intensity that there's a difference, but also in the underlying motivation, in the ability to heal from it, and where it's coming from, and the trauma that lies underneath.
And I think also an avoidant person, you know, deep down, they do have that need for connection. They do have that need of being able to depend on another person. You know, there's just this huge fear that they, you know, they just don't allow themselves to depend on others, because they've been really hurt, you know, when they in the past depended on others. So, but the need is still there, you know, they just like push it away.
Next time, what are we doing next time? We're going to wrap it up. That's how we called it. That doesn't mean that you can only join it when you've done both sessions, or even any, because we will still go into what to do with things that we've learned now about ourselves. You know, what do you do with your belief systems? What do you do with your attachment style? What do you do with your shadow? We've went a little bit into this, but next time will be maybe more an insight into how therapy works with tools and how the healing happens, whereas now we just try to create a little bit of understanding. Next time it will be more about the healing. And this big question of, and now what to do with it? You know, now I know these things, but I want to do something with it. And I'm super excited for this, because I think that's a lot of fun. And we will discuss the things that you've realized, and maybe you had some ideas over these 6 weeks. No,
in total
6 weeks that we've been doing this. So we're going to discuss it and talk about it, have a lot of questions, but also a lot of tools and healing things.
There'll be exercises, but then also a lot of space to talk, because the same we said last time and the same we said at the beginning today, these can be triggering, and it's not something that, okay, now the workshop is over, I'm going home and this is a way, it's not in my mind anymore. It's like, it might happen that from now until next time more things come up, or you see yourself like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm falling into this pattern, and before I wasn't aware of it. So that there might be more content, and there might be also like more feelings that come up. You might get frustrated and you might get angry with yourself, like there might be a lot of sadness that comes up. So this is also why we give some time, so you have this time to like process all of what has happened, but then also like there will be a space for all of these things to be talked about next time, and to we will give you some tools as to what to do about this. How can I soothe myself? Also, how can I just hold myself through this process? So hope you join us next time.
Yeah, definitely. And if you have
you have to. Oh, we just got a really nice compliment.
Nice.
Thanks. Someone just said, thanks a lot. Your way of explaining things is really inspiring. That's so nice. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
To everybody, if you have any questions in between these, like between now and the next session in 2 weeks, let us know. If you have general feedback regarding the session, let me know via any channel. And I would say thank you very much. We are done here at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, so nice. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye everyone. Ciao. Sleep well.
So nice.
So nice.
Oh, it's so nice to see this.
Yeah.
And we will be back with Deep Talk next week. For everybody who feels comfortable listening to a German session, it will be about anxiety and panic attacks. Or then next Monday will be the first movement session. So we will dive into dance therapy in German.
Nice.
2 weeks.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.